I just want to start with the statement in the PMO institutional report, which indicates that PMO staff engaged with Premier Kenney's Chief of Staff, Ms. Livingstone, on February 5th and 12th. I just want to confirm that during that time, the PMO did not discuss the possible use of the Emergencies Act during those engagements. Is that correct?
That it was not me having those conversations, but that is my understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you. And with respect to the First Minister's meeting, Mr. Broadhead, you were asked about your understanding of the various positions of premiers at that meeting. I'd like the clerk to pull up ssm.nsc.can 50625. And these are some expanded notes prepared and produced by the Government of Canada describing that meeting. Once we have them up, I'll ask the clerk to please scroll down to page 3. Okay, so we can see here that there's some further notes about the comments of Premier Kenney at this meeting, and I'll just walk through some of these right now. He starts by describing the situation in Coutts and how it went from 1,000 trucks on a rolling protest to 900 going home with 100 staying behind, and then down to a group of 40, which he described as a core group. Then you'll see him describe the arrests at the border and indicate, we believe the situation has been secured. And further down there, have procured on market for equipment and have drivers in place, unless an unexpected surprise should open Coutts border crossing today. A little farther down again, would be problematic to declare emergency today to take momentum of arrest last night. Declaration risks further radicalizing thousands of sympathizers in Alberta. Know you have a lot of serious issues to balance off, including in Ottawa, but I am suggesting this could create a net negative for Alberta. If we need to seize or compel people, we are prepared to use our own Emergencies Act. So you would agree that it's fair to say that the Premier's position at this First Minister's meeting was that invoking the Federal Emergencies Act was neither wanted nor needed in Alberta, correct?
Yeah, I would say he was definitely clear that he did not believe it was needed in Alberta at that time.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to switch tracks with you and ask about what was done to prepare the Prime Minister for the February 13th Cabinet meeting, and specifically where his inputs of information came from. So I'm going to ask you, you can answer yes or no, whether the PMO was responsible for providing the Prime Minister with the following information. And that's about the status of the RCMP operation in Coutts. Was it the PMO that was responsible for providing that information to the Prime Minister?
No.
How about the status of Alberta's acquisition of tow trucks from the private market?
The Privy Council leads these briefings that you're referring to.
Okay, so I'll just name off a few more, and maybe then you can tell me if there was anything in my list that that the PMO was responsible for providing the information to the Prime Minister. And those are the status of the protests in Windsor at the Ambassador Bridge, the status of opening of the Ambassador Bridge, the status of the OPS operational plan with respect to the protests in Ottawa, or that the Commissioner Lucky was of the view that not all tools available through existing legislation had yet been exhausted.
We may have added information if we'd heard it through ministers' offices or through open source information, but the briefing on all the matters would have been led by the clerk of the Privy Council, the deputy clerk of the NSIA.
Okay,
and
thank you.
I would just add that we heard at various points in the weeks leading up to invocation of the Act that action was about to be taken in some of the places that you mentioned. And on the point about RCMP stating that not all tools have been exhausted, that was obvious to everyone. In various locations, law enforcement had tools that they weren't able to enforce because there were other more serious issues preventing that. And that's partly why decision was made to invoke the Act the next day.
Okay, and so you would agree that the Prime Minister had that information as well, that there were tools available, but that they weren't being used?
As I said, that was obvious to everyone who was watching what was going on the ground.
Okay, thank you. I would like the clerk to please pull up ssm.nsc.can 402941. And this is a record that Commission Counsel has taken you through in some detail already. There's just a few places where I was hoping you could help me read some of the writing. So, Mr. Clerk, if you could please scroll down to page 12. Actually, this is not something that I need clarification on the writing on, but something I do have a question on. Let me just make sure I'm in the right place here. So if you see on the right-hand side, there's a note beside Brenda, and I'm assuming this is Commissioner Lucky. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And she indicates with respect to Coots, they were almost gone, but a pastor incited them to stay, was 250 vehicles, now down to 40, and weapons are in the protest, need to go slow here. Was the Prime Minister part of this conversation?
Yes, he was. This was the February 10th incident response group meeting.
Okay, good, thank you. And then if we go to page 23, here's where I'll need your help interpreting the writing. Thank you. So we can see about a quarter of way down the page, there's an arrow and it says specific. And what's the next word after that?
To be honest, I can't read it either. The quality of the photocopy is not strong.
Okay. So specific something, draft list, using the money as and then what's that next word there?
As a hook for the national stuff. So this was a reference to we knew and we heard on the FMM call that some premiers and some people felt that the act should not be applied nationally. And this comment referred to needing to underscore in the communications that part of the reason the act needed to apply nationally was so that it would apply to financial transactions across the country, given many of the demonstrators were from across the country.
And I think you just said that this was about needing to refer in the communications. What communications are you talking about?
So this was February 14th, 12:30 p.m. after the FMM, as preparations were underway for a potential prime ministerial announcement later that afternoon. Prime Minister took the decision to invoke the act later that afternoon, and he went out and announced it.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about that announcement. If we can go to ssm.can 402665. And if we go to the very last email in this record, there's a discussion of a press conference that was at that time scheduled for noon on February 14th. And we'll see the time of this email is listed as February 13th, 8 p.m. Now, I'm not sure if this is one of the emails that's caught with the time difference related to Greenwich Mean Time, but it's either 3 p.m. or 8 p.m. on the 13th. In either event, that's before the cabinet meeting, correct?
I can't confirm the timing of the email, but
okay.
It could be.
Okay. And it indicates that there was going to be a press conference the next day with the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister Blair, Minister Mendicino, and Minister Lametti. There's a bit more discussion in other emails, including that Minister Lametti is there just to answer questions, and that only the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister will provide comments. Is this because that was the press conference that was intended to announce the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
So what I would say is, at this point, there were numerous statements being made by the Prime Minister and other ministers to media, sometimes in the form of a press conference. My recollection was this was planning for a statement of some sort. And yes, given the Emergencies Act was under consideration, it was a scenario at that time that they could be making announcements about the Emergencies Act the next day, but the decision had not been taken at that point.
So you'll see that it says, as you know, the presser is to provide an update on the federal government response to the blockades as well as the Ukraine. And I'll take it from your answer that there was some anticipation that maybe it might be about the Emergencies Act. But what other announcement was going to be made about the blockades the next day?
There could have been any number of measures taken, and that was the examination going on exactly at that time. What tools could exist? Is it going to be enough? Decision was Emergencies Act had the tools required, and that's why that decision was taken the next day.
And I understand that part of the DMO's role is to prepare speeches for the Prime Minister. Is that correct?
The DPMO, no, the Prime Minister's office and PCO prepare speeches for the Prime Minister.
Sorry, I thought in the institutional report that there was mention of drafting speeches by the Prime Minister's. Oh, I'm sorry, by the Prime Minister's office. Yes,
absolutely.
Okay. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. Did the Prime Minister's office?
Just to let you know, I think you're over your time, so you're going to have to wrap up pretty soon.
Okay, I'll just finish this area. Did the Deputy Prime Minister's office draft a speech for the Prime Minister for the press conference on February 14th?
I'm not aware.
You're not aware. Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next, call on the convoy organizers, please.